Good morning, YouTube. Warbles on lot here with the conclusion to the Mindfield, and they're talking about a Saudi Arabian robot that's been given citizenship
of artificial intelligence.
It's quite too early to make a judgment on that. I believe time we need time to see how this event is going to unfold. On the one hand, we might say it's a public relation event. It is an attempt to send a very strong and concise message to the world that the Saudis are going to become technologically focused, and it is a message which display the change that is going to happen in the economy and in the society. And at the same time, we may look at it as uh, possibly a question that needs to be asked to the whole world, because the issue of citizenship is not just a decision to be made by a single country. When you change the form of the object, if I may call it an object, or the entity which is subject to the citizenship. So the Saudis may indeed have their own rights to grant Sophia as a citizen, but it will be raising an interesting question if Sophia decide to go and travel to another country, whether this country is going to admit Sophia as a human entity which has a citizenship per se, or whether this country is going to refuse and deny Sophia entrance to the country. So there are lots of implication beyond a single government making a decision on something like that, because it is something that the whole world needs to come up with a grasp and an agreement on.
God, that's a really. So, Scott, does Sophia have rights? I mean, that is, well, see, I think this then harkens back to another conversation we've had about the nature of citizenship. I mean, to me, you can only even talk about the conferral of citizenship on something like Sophia when citizenship has been extended, say, to an elite athlete or an Olympic athlete in order to, better promote the interests of a particular country. So there's already the decoupling, isn't there, between rights and citizenship at play here.
And also inheritance and citizenship.
Yes.
Right. So, I mean, if we've crudely done this before, where we've spoken about models of citizenship, like civic models as against ethnocentric models, for example, you would say that the Saudi model is much closer to an ethnocentric model. And yet, here comes Sophia with no history at all, no ethnicity, presumably. Certainly, if Sophia was Saudi, her name probably might have been Safia rather than Sophia. But yeah, this would be an unusual citizen for Saudi Arabia suddenly to have if it were human. And so even more so now. And so, yeah, I guess we're delving more into the realm of what this does to the concept of citizenship, which is not really where we're intending to go. But it does raise interesting questions, doesn't it? Because you can't answer the question of what it does to the concept of citizenship without raising the parallel question of what it does to our concept of a human being and of humanity.
I think that's exactly right. And Hussein, you've actually written, I think, quite beautifully on this about the implications of this because as soon as you name someone as a citizen, you're putting them in relation with other citizens, are you not?
Absolutely. There is looking at the citizens by default. We need to make an assumption that all citizens have equal rights. And this comes with its own implications, and the implication that I talked about within my article mainly focused on three dimensions, and one of them is identity, and that goes back to what Walid was saying. So what is Sophia? There are dimensions of identity, the easy ones, which I talked about in my article, were mainly focusing on authenticating the identity, and that is to make sure that if Sophia identify itself or identify Sophia as Sophia, we need to establish that this is the case. But what makes Sophia goes beyond the authentication level. That goes into what is Sophia as a legal entity? What is Sophia as an entity that is going to be embedded in a social context and is going to interact in the society? And by admitting Sophia as a citizen, what are the implications for that on the interaction of Sophia and Sophia's impact on the society? And I'm finding really difficult, Scott, to say whether it is she or it. And even in my own article, I always talked about Sophia many times, just because to avoid identifying. We need to define what Sophia is in the first place if we're going to grant Sophia this type of status.
There is something though. Can I put this to you both? And I'm going to try to make it as simple as I can, although it probably frames a rather complex thought. I mean, one of the things that I always like whenever these marvelous examples of artificial intelligence suddenly go public is that they're never as impressive as you imagine they're going to be. You know what I mean? So actually hearing Sophia talk is incredibly uninspiring. The very clear mix of pre-scripted remarks and then remarks that are obviously in response to a kind of superficially processed keyword that then generates something. And the only term I can find to describe that is almost Pavlovian. You know, there's almost a kind of trigger mechanism that says, okay, now I need to say this. I realize that this is sort of the part of the mechanics of artificial intelligence itself.
Well, for now it is.
For now, well, yes, but I guess here's my issue. That one of the strange things, especially if you see the way that robotics are being portrayed in popular culture, and here I think of a television program like Westworld, or a relatively recent movie like Blade Runner 2049, I think what's interesting is that the only way of giving artificial intelligence something like a requisite human dimension is by subjecting that artificial intelligence to such extraordinary layers of trauma that it's almost like as if what it means to be human isn't to have this kind of mystical, magical spark, but to be so perpetually the victim of layer upon layer upon layer of human crime or of human violence. In other words, it's almost as if we're coming to almost from a reverse angle, we're coming to a really strange alternative definition of what it might mean to be a human in the first place, not simply as a biological mechanism like a robot, but instead something that is this bundle of affects that have been created through violence and misadventure.
Quite interesting. So, I mean, I would like to look at it as a technologist and ask myself, how can I design a technology that is likely to benefit the society? So we need to define what the objective is. What is the objective of having a robot to be like a human? Possibly we may have some justification for that, but do we have a need for that? So it would boil down to me into what are the needs and what is the objective. The technology is in our hand, and we are going to design it as we want to achieve our own objective. So what is this objective? If it's going to be designing a robot to be a human, why do we need to do that? And we need to ask ourselves, what are the benefits, what are the costs, what are the risks, and what are the consequences of coming up with an objective like that? And if we can answer these questions, then I believe we establish what I will call the business case to start thinking about the technological implication and the technological consequences of having this.
And indeed, why do we feel the urge to build them like human beings? That's an interesting point.
Absolutely.
You'll be able to hear more from Hussein Abbas in the podcast element of the show if you're listening on the podcast.
But that's it from the live portion of the Mindfield. Let us know what you think. You can visit us on our website. Just search for R in the Mindfield. You can follow us on Twitter as well, or subscribe to our podcast. That's it for now.
Yeah, okay. So Saudi Arabia has conferred citizenship rights on a robot. That's insane. It's literally insane. But this is Saudi Arabia. It wants to become a world leader. Artificial intelligence has been designated as a field of progress. In the future, we are, as a species, expected to progress onward and upward, becoming ever more sophisticated. So therefore, Saudi Arabia has conferred citizenship rights on a robot. And the robot doesn't sound as if it's much more advanced than the sort of shit they had at the World Fair in New York in 1940. It's just, that's bent, completely bent. Meanwhile, everything's gone fairly quiet on the same-sex marriage survey form business. Although I did hear that Tony Abbott is now suggesting that a 40% no vote would be considered a moral victory for the forces of conservatism. So, like Tronald Dump and Joseph Goebbels before him, Tony Abbott is indulging in squares and circles. That is to say, once upon a time, I think it was well before Adolf Hitler was elected as Chancellor, Joseph Goebbels famously stated that given sufficient knowledge of the population concerned and given sufficient repetition of the message, it should be no trouble at all to prove that a square is in fact a circle, because a square and a circle are words, and words are symbols, and symbols have variable meanings. So squaring the circle is really easy if you are a political propagandist. So Tony Abbott is claiming that a 40% no vote is a moral victory. As everything that he's worked for years goes down the tubes, he's claiming that's a victory because he doesn't want to be a loser. Therefore, he reshapes his view of the universe. He redefines what losing means. It's like Trottle Dump. He's just been told that the world is currently on track for 3.5 degrees Celsius worth of global warming by 2100 with 20 metres of sea level rise. We've got the highest atmospheric carbon dioxide levels for 800,000 years. And his administration's response, his maladministration's response is that there is still debate about the Earth's climate's sensitivity to changing the gas mix. These peanuts don't want to know. They think that if they can convince enough people to agree with them in a room full of people who know nothing about the subject that they're discussing, then that means they have shaped reality to fit their ideology. They don't get the fact that physics and chemistry really kind of don't give a shit about your ideology and your politics. It doesn't matter to the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere that a whole bunch of people find it really, really, really convenient to live in a suburb and drive hours each way to get to work and come home from work. And they're just going to fart. Well, they're going to suck in 2 or 3 cubic metres of air per minute just to run the engine of their fire chariot. And they're going to fart out 2.5 kilograms of carbon dioxide for every litre of petroleum fuel that they burn. It's really convenient for them during their lifetime. It means they're effectively eating their grandchildren's lunch. Anybody who lives within 20 metres vertically of any sea level anywhere in the world, 100 years, well, no, not 100 years' time, 83 years' time, that's all going to be underwater. Bad time to be investing in coastal real estate. Very, very bad time to be investing in coastal real estate. And Tronald Dump's running around Asia. What's he going to succeed in doing in Asia? How can that affect Australia? Well, the refinery that supplies Australia with all of its road transport fuel and jet fuel and train fuel and bulldozer fuel and tractor fuel, that refinery is in Singapore, which is in Asia. If Tronald Dump goes over there and indulges in sabre rattling and succeeds in touching off any kind of a shooting match, there's 29 days maximum storage of transport fuel in Australia. Our average holding is 21 days supply, and twice a month it dips to 14 days. Meanwhile, there's 9 meals for every Australian on the supermarket shelves at any one time, with just-in-time delivery and 24 hours restocking, all coordinated by computers in the capital cities. So, yeah, 3 weeks to 5 weeks after the last boatload of fuel comes from Singapore to Australia, and Australia ceases to be a nation at all. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.